Good morning. I don't mean to start with an apology, but I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I'm going to have to read from my notes because I've changed my presentation on a number of occasions over the last 24 hours. And I'm sorry if I offend anybody in the room by the things that I might say about firefighter safety and firefighter injury, because I'm very, very passionate about the subject. I started taking a very serious look at firefighter injury 10 years ago. And one of the things that I very quickly began to realise that firefighter safety is a very broad subject, very broad church, but firefighter injury isn't necessarily all that broad at all. A much narrower focus. And in the end, because I was so frustrated by the way things were occurring in the UK, I opted to eventually, when I retired and I could afford it, pursue my passion through a PhD. But for more years of my research that I could ever remember, all of the scientists and academics and researchers, sociologists, psychologists, and occupational health and safety experts were impressing on us that in the 21st century, we should be working towards a zero vision paradigm. That nobody gets hurt at all, nobody's injured in the workplace. And now we've emerged from this global pandemic. The so-called zero vision paradigm are taking a holistic view, and they believe that workplace vision zero should include the health and well-being of all employees, all workers. But this vision zero, nobody gets hurt, is really a metaphoric destination. And it's the journey, an effort that anybody puts into getting there that's more important. I'm just wondering how many times my notes are going to fall on the floor. But really, what is the main motivator is an embedded safety culture, without which the journey is going to be impossible. But the frustrating thing is, all of the science, all of those academics, all of that research is based on the normal workplace. It's based on industrial, commercial, building construction, some critical workplaces like nuclear fuel, offshore oil, and industries such as that. It's not based on the workplace of the firefighter. There is nothing specific in Vision Zero that can embrace the conditions that the firefighter faces. The workplace of the firefighter is fundamentally safe. Vision Zero, 21st century Vision Zero, believes that legislation and statute has reached a stage where the workplace should be fundamentally safe. After all, the very existence of the Fire and Rescue Service and the reason we have firefighters is because society needs the fire service, needs the firefighter to mitigate and, where necessary, physically intervene to render the chaos of somebody else's misfortune safe. The start point is unsafe conditions. Now, we all know that a large proportion of the hazard of the firefighter's workplace, or should I say place of work, is relatively inert. Fundamentally safe. Fundamentally safe. But when the call is made and a response is made, the demons are waiting to strike, sometimes even before they reach the scene of operations. But once in attendance, there can be no doubt in anybody's mind that the safe working environment is out the door, it is unsafe. They're there to render the circumstances safe. Yesterday you explored several aspects of the workplace hazards, as you will again later today. But things can and will not turn out as expected. Which is why it's essential to build on a safety culture and take the journey towards the so-called zero vision. The thing that's always going to frustrate that journey is people. It's people. It's us. It's the human factor. But that's all well and good. All of that science, all of those psychologists and behavioural experts have created a lexicon, a language that doesn't lend itself well to the pragmatist. I'm a pragmatist. I suspect there are many pragmatists in the room, and I, like every firefighter, embrace simplicity. Simplicity in understanding. So, my first place, by accident, by default, I became a researcher. And the start point for me is, can somebody please define safety culture? Well, I'm a student, and then somebody punches at the library and tells me to go and find out for myself. Did you know there are 200 definitions of safety culture? That's the kind of simplicity that can confuse. However, you may all recall a few years ago the video, the TV coverage of a captain in the US Fire Department falling through a roof in Fresno. In the investigation that followed, all of the investigating officers sought to simplify the definition. And it became embraced by many US fire departments. The narrative of this definition holds some very important syntax. The Fresno Fire Department report was written by 8 academic, very senior chief officers from 5 different US fire departments, which is the way they investigate in the States, to ensure that everybody understood why it occurred and, more importantly, how it could be avoided in future. They summarised their entire chapter about safety culture with that final statement. And what this statement acknowledges is the way work is done, the way you guys actually at the sharp end do the work, isn't the way it's designed to be done. It's not the way it's imagined to be done by the authors of the policy, of the procedure, and of the guidance. And it may even have been influenced, this summary, by that statement published many, many years earlier. But what that does is it leaves a question that needs to be answered. Which, we, where? Who is it? Where is it? Where are they? Who is the group that safety culture really applies to? Now, my passion has a very, very sharp focus, and I would argue that the most important of all the groups that safety culture should focus on is the firefighter. But to get a better view of what this actually means, I've got a bit of an animation, a little bit of a story, so that you can see that there are several layers of cultural groups. There you are. The beginning. A perfect cube. Sharp corners, sharp edges. And then another group is involved. An assistant chief officer. Pass a message to his area commander. By order of the chief fire officer, a comet will appear above headquarters. If it rains, we'll go inside and watch a film. And what has just happened is the fine edges and corners of the cube have been shaved. And then the next level slightly changes things. I'm not sure if the interpretation is reading this, is it? Yes, no? No? Okay. For your benefit, we'll go back to the beginning. What? Oh no. The Chief Fire Officer issued the following directive to his Assistant Chief Officers. Tomorrow afternoon, at approximately 5 o'clock, Halley's Comet will be visible in the sky over this area. An event that occurs every 75 years. I will present a brief lecture on this rare phenomenon to all headquarters staff who wish to assemble in the car park. In case of rain, we will not be able to see anything, in which case ask everybody to assemble in the foyer at reception and I will show them films of it. The cube. The next officer involved, or the next level of ownership of this vital information, one Assistant Chief Officer passed a message to his area commander. By order of the Chief Fire Officer, at 5 o'clock tomorrow, Halley's Comet will appear above headquarters. If it rains, all those planning to attend will be marched into the foyer where this rare phenomenon will take place. Something that occurs once every 75 years. And that shaves the corner off the cube. When he was told, the group commander said to his station commander, tomorrow at 5 o'clock, the chief will make a phenomenal appearance in the car park at headquarters with the Halley's Comets, something that occurs every 75 years. If it rains, he'll invite the comets to play in the foyer. And our cube is beginning to disappear completely. And then the group at the sharp end, later, a watch commander told his team at their briefing, when it rains tomorrow at 5 o'clock, the phenomenally old chief officer will drive his classic Comet into the foyer. And the action derived from that is, I'm assuming all car enthusiasts are welcome. And in that sequence of events, a finely honed, the way I want the work done, becomes a ball. And that's endemic of these cultural groups, because the way they communicate, the way they distill information and respond to it, is an important part of the way we do things. What this really demonstrates is how something that's done in the workplace is clearly not the way it was imagined it would be done. And for over a decade, the disciples of the zero vision paradigm have been developing their science, and they're emphatic about the way work as imagined, but of more importance to us as planned, are simply not the way it gets done at the sharp end, when all of the dynamics in the environment are influencing behaviour. The way we respond to all of the environmental things that can influence behaviour. And I would ask conference now, in achieving firefighter safety, which where is the group that gets work done, but is more likely to suffer from the unexpected outcomes of any errors that may manifest themselves. The object of the firefighter, taking the ball as a symbol, is to score an effective goal. To beat the demon, the injury demon. But as we see all too often, and you see it every time you turn the TV on to watch soccer, the ball kicked in the same way by the same person doesn't necessarily always go in the back of the goal. Occasionally, it will rebound from the woodwork and it will cause a bloody nose. And that bloody nose may be minor or it may be major. The consequences from the same causal circumstances will or could be different. And this is where the firefighter injury focus narrows. Whilst firefighter safety is a broad picture, injury really is quite narrow because of similarity in causal circumstances. What they do over there that causes them a slight nosebleed could cause them over there a severe nosebleed if they don't know how you arrived at the solution and how better to approach the goal and take the kick next time. And the team coach, the supervisor, the team coach knows that if he doesn't let the whole team know how to score that goal, then they're likely never to get anywhere near the European Cup. How does it all put together? Safety science helps us understand these layers in a specific way. Where the things, the very sharp cornered cube, does over time become a ball. This is where the firefighter at the sharp end is undertaking the activity. Those at the beginning of the cycle are applied the word task makers by the scientists. They derive the task and the task requirements. But it's the sharp end, that we wear, them, they, that undertake the activity and take the actions. They do all the acting, and that is where the active error will occur. Now, this theory, this common cause theory, suggests that there's a link between near misses and minor nosebleeds and major nosebleeds. And many, many years ago, almost 100 years ago now, an an accident investigator, an industrial accident investigator and engineer, William Heinrich, came up with what is known as Heinrich's pyramid. What he found, after he investigated 5,000 accident claims, what he found was that for every one very serious accident, very serious injury, there were 29 minor injuries as a result of not exactly, but very, very similar circumstances. But there were also 300 events where similar circumstances occurred and there was no injury at all. So, whilst science is out on the validity of Heinrich's common cause theory, what I found when I analysed 450 firefighter injury reports is that there was common causal issues. And the outcome, the consequences, can fall anywhere on that continuum. But the focus, according to the School of Common Cause and the Zero Vision paradigm, should be on near misses. Now let's be serious. Not only don't they appreciate that the workplace of the firefighter is unsafe, let's say optimistically that a fire service only has 10 major injury events in a year. And I do believe that to be very optimistic. What that means is thousands and thousands of near-miss reports. Really? Should we focus on a near-miss? Last year in England, there were 49 major injury accidents to firefighters reported. That's 15,000 near misses based on common cause theory. So really, are we going to focus on near miss? Safety science and global accident and injury investigation is in agreement. And now, the little bit of research that I've done corroborates that this common cause theory is valid. But the demons don't necessarily respect it. And arguably, I believe, in an ideal world, it's the minor bloody noses that we really, if we're going to focus on, we should focus on the minor bloody noses. Let me share a story. Many years ago, a very young, very inexperienced firefighter in his first 6 months of service responds to a factory fire on the station ground next door. His supervisor, his team coach, when they arrive, finds out what is required from the crews already working. The referee tells the team coach, I have a team of 2 firefighters about to start a fire attack in a ground floor compartment, and they need help managing the hose. Can you send somebody in to help manage their hose? The young firefighter enters the room, having been told where to go and what to do, and as he enters the room, he notices that a large portion of the floor has been burned away. Turns out later they find out that it was burned away from a previous fire where arsonists had been trying to destroy this factory. Makes his way around the big hole, lets the other crew know that he's there, and all he can see is their legs anyway, because the smoke layer is down to the knees, inversion layer is at knee height. Takes hold of the hose, tells them they're ready to rock and roll, and they advance into the compartment where the fire is. They're about to start their fire attack. And within a few short minutes, one of the many fire phenomenon that we now have more respect for occurs, and the fire attack team rapidly withdraw. As they do, the young firefighter, the young inexperienced firefighter, is pushed by the hose through the hole in the floor. Fortunately for him, he lands with legs either side of a floor joist. Ouch. Leaves the room. In fact, all 3 firefighters leave the room. The fire attack team go over to their coach to explain what had just occurred. That young fireman goes over to his coach. Did you get that Freudian slip? The young fireman, in 1972, that's what they were, fireman. He goes over to his team coach and explains what has occurred. And his team coach, so the whole spectating crowd can hear, says, well, take your trousers down, let's have a look, see if you're bleeding. The young firefighter chooses not to in public, goes across to an ambulance. They take a quick look and they put a dressing on a minor pierce wound caused by a nail. Fast forward 30 years. A firefighter with 20 years service, really experienced, is on the 3rd floor of a factory fire. This particular factory has an engineered, designed hole in the floor. The hole corresponds with all 3 floors, and it's designed to allow the movement of heavy plant and machinery throughout the building. However, on this occasion, when the hose is moved backwards, he falls through all 3 floors and suffers fatal injuries. Now I'm going to share my artist's impression with you of the circumstances of the first incident. There you are, young firefighter, managing the hose on the outside curve with his back to the hole. Now, when they returned to station, the coach, instead of saying, well, it looks like you're all right, we'll leave it there then, and the young firefighter, through embarrassment of the way people might think he made such an obvious mistake, did not register a report. When clearly, if the hose moves under pressure, it is only going to move in one direction, which isn't a good idea. Now, had that event been reported, it may well have found its way into the training manuals that were common in the United Kingdom at the time, and they were called the Manuals of Firemanship. And those training manuals were designed to include images, lots of images that would visually demonstrate the point that's being made and the visual image and the symbols leave a lasting impression. And had that been in the manuals of firemanship, and the solution, it may have saved a life 30 years later. But contemporary thought of this Vision Zero paradigm would rather be focused not on what went wrong, but on what should have gone right. Now, I struggled with this concept. How can you investigate what went well without in some way having to capture the things that didn't go well? But that's the way the paradigm would like accident investigation. That's the way the paradigm would like understanding active error in all of those normal workplaces. Take us on the journey to the zero vision of no accidents. But with my research now, what I think is a more valid reason, a more valid focus, is those events that aren't near misses, those events that leave a lasting lesson, a simple lesson like a minor nail injury in the inside of a thigh, instead of those injuries that cause some injury that, because of an absence from duty, means everything's affected. You know of fire stations where if one firefighter doesn't turn up when expected, everything has to be turned upside down, and, more importantly, the response when it's made is one pair of working hands short. That is a compromise to safety. And the demons are waiting to strike. So when that ball is kicked, should we focus on that? Or should we focus elsewhere? Well, yeah, injury occurred. And based on this common cause, that they may have the same causal patterns, may be influenced by the same environmental conditions, focus on them instead. My research, when I analysed, I found that they were in the majority. Where people had been injured, but never took any absence from work because the injury was less severe, we're in the majority, which surprised me. It really did surprise me. And I thought, well, maybe that should be a better focus. They still know the story about the little boy falling through the hole in the floor. And that story may save that guy in 30 years' time. And if we apply the pyramid to that, we'd have no time loss injury based on major accident reporting. We'd have a smaller number of no time loss injuries. There's the theory. But there are other demons. I've explained that there are demons without the firefighter, all that environmental stuff. But in those cultural groups, there are demons at work within. And these are extracts from some of the responses I had in interviews with injured firefighters. The first one, at the time, during overall and makeup, I'd relaxed dress, undone his bunker coat. The decision to relax dress was as a result of habitual practice at that time and following the behaviours of my peers. So when he kicked the ball, all those embers fell down the back of his jacket, and it took some time to get those burning embers out. So those injuries magnified as the demon got to work. In the second case, at the time, I was focused on the task in hand, tunnel vision, and didn't consider the bigger picture. I partly believe this was due to my inexperience and desire to succeed at the task in front of my fellow firefighters. On this occasion, I kicked the ball. I did not report it through embarrassment and fear that I'd be punished. I didn't mean to step back through the hole in the floor, said the firefighter. Why should I be punished? But what is more worrying is the companion of the second demon, the macho male demon, the one that influences women firefighters to suffer lifting and carrying injuries for fear of being considered to be weak, or for them not to report an injury at all for the same reason. Part of the cause isn't gender specific. It's a lesson that we should learn. Anyway, here I am, halfway through, I think, and my focus has been on the sharp end. My focus has been on the we that do the work. What about the other cultural groups? Well, they're the group that do not realise that they removed in time and distance from when the active error occurs, they don't realise that they are establishing accident-causing conditions. They have no knowledge of that. And unless we have a way of getting back up the system from the sharp end and into the latent level, we won't know how to fix things. We won't know how to inform the coach and the team manager how to improve things next. The truth is, I'm really only just beginning to understand the things that, the demons that exist and how they influence outcomes without the firefighter. That can cause injury. But I'm only just beginning to understand the demons within, the human factors, the things that can impinge on the way people do their work, the things that, the environmental conditions, the preconditions that can influence the way they do their work. Several of the people that I interviewed who were injured were injured because they were responding to and dealing with what we refer to in the UK as persons reported incidents. That means that at some stage in gathering the detail of the call for response or on arrival, somebody has suggested that somebody may still be inside a burning building. And they change their behaviour. The level of risk that they are prepared to accept changes. And I'm sure everybody in the room would expect the difference to in some way influence the way they react. And I got all of this data from my research, which started after I investigated the death of 2 firefighters. Delving deep into all of the actions, all of the activity and the active errors that resulted in these 2 fatalities, what quickly became absolutely clear to me was every decision they made, regardless of the outcome, every decision they made, and this wasn't a person's reported incident, made absolute sense to them at the time. Absolute sense. So I then developed the view that, are we actually training the way we do people? Are we actually training firefighters to make critical decisions? I know in the UK in the last 10 years we've invested millions and millions, I'm going to say euros, but really I mean pounds because of Brexit, millions on the infrastructure and technology that improves the quality of the incident commander's decision making. They have a bar that's set that they must step over or jump over to prove they're competent as incident commanders, and they can make critical decisions. And then a few weeks after qualifying, they'll go to a factory fire, they'll gather all of the necessary information, they'll establish their situation awareness, and they will make a fire attack plan. And that fire attack plan will involve a coach, a team coach, going over to 2 firefighters and sending them through the door where all of the unknown, all of the unexpected, where the demons are, and the only 2 people in that equation that haven't been trained to deal with critical decision making are the 2 people that have just sent through the door. And I argue that it is they that should be included in this need to demonstrate competence in critical decision making. We in the UK invented this thing many, many years ago, way back 1980, called dynamic risk assessment. It was meant for firefighters to use when they're experiencing circumstances that they need to make a decision about. You can't train someone to make a decision based on dynamic risk assessment. All you can do is tell them what it is, where it applies, and how to go through the 5-step process. It's only with acquired knowledge and experience that they can add the decision element to the equation. So, my research set out to find out how many of these firefighters had been injured as a consequence of being faced with a critical decision. And to my absolute surprise and amazement, while the factor was really quite high, the higher cause of firefighter injury in England was a lack of skill. They were skill-based errors. The way we do things around here. The question this raises, and therefore the search for solutions, they focus on each of these safety culture group levels. They focus on the need to ensure firefighters, the way they are going to do things when they're in the demon's workplace, are informed by knowledge, understanding, skill, and experience. They're the four most important components of competence. Ownership of competence and those four components lies at every level, every socio-cultural level of the organisation. Any fire service, any fire department, any fire station. Firefighters at the sharp end are can-do people. They will take somebody else's misery and chaos, they will improvise, they'll adapt, and they'll overcome the malevolence of the injury-causing demon. And we should expect and accept that to do that, no matter how we imagine work should be done, it won't be the way we expect it to be done. This also means that is a pivotal in the role of any culture that wants to meander towards or race towards the Vision Zero paradigm. There's got to be some basic steps. There's got to be a start point. There's got to be a start point that takes account of the human beings involved, the people involved in those sharp-end decisions. The language. You saw one particular case earlier where a report wasn't made for fear of blame. The language that accident investigators use is a very binary language. It has positivity and negativity. It uses words like blame. The worst words it uses are right and wrong. You shouldn't have done that. Serves you right. You were wrong. We should perhaps try and find a more suitable way of describing these things when we want to label them, when we want to learn from them. In the US now, many fire departments have tried to set aside the expression near miss. And they're starting to use in many of their investigations and reports, most of which are published, they're open source, close call. But I, like I said earlier, use the image of the firefighter managing the hose, and it leaves a lasting visual impression, like I have in parts of this presentation. I've used the analogy of the goal. Could we not call that a good catch? When the demon doesn't get the ball, when it rebounds and we prevent it from causing a bloody nose, or a good save. One thing we shouldn't overlook is they are the people who do things. They are the people with the knowledge and the experience. We should embrace that. And when we decide we've got to change procedures, they should have a place at the table. They should have a place at the table when the strategy is being determined, and they should certainly have a place at the table when a standard operating procedure is being developed. We should allow the coach some discretion. We should allow the coach the discretion to be able to report these things when it's important, quickly and efficiently. Maybe even use social media, which can be used to ensure truth, not rumour. And above all else, the procedure has got to be simple. If you've got to fill a 12-page report out because somebody broke a fingernail, are you going to do it? Right. And above all else, we should ensure that they have the knowledge, the skill, the understanding and the experience. They are competent. Now, let's go back to that definition earlier. There it is again. The sum of attitudes, customs and beliefs that distinguishes one group of people from another. Culture is transmitted through language, as I've been shouting and barking, material objects, ritual, instructions and art from one generation to the next. There's some important words there. Culture is transmitted through objects, instructions and art from one generation to the next. Can I offer a perfect example of how images, whether it's a demon's head of football, football coach analogy, the football manager, the goal, how images can influence behaviour. Schiphol Airport. Behavioural psychologists many years ago were asked by Schiphol Airport if they can help with the cleaning bill. Right? Can you help us with the cleaning bill in the men's urinals? It took them only 10 days to reach a solution. And the cleaning bills went down in Schiphol Airport by 75% just by the influence, behavioural influence of an image. This is how influential on behaviour, and dare I say male behaviour, that objects, implied instructions and art can have. In adopting a safety culture and imagining how work should be done, we should be mindful of all the messages we use to influence behaviour. And with respect, can I offer more food for thought? I would argue, and I have passionately, that it's knowledge, skill, understanding, and at all the socio-cultural levels, experience that saves lives. And that alone will ensure both heroes and victims go home. Thank you.